"Please take me, I'll do anything," the peasant begged, and the prince said, "Then give me sons." The church bell tolls, the iron gate slams shut. A barefoot girl kneels in the dirt before the crown prince, her voice breaking as she begs for her father's life. The courtiers laugh. But then the prince's cold reply cuts through the hall like a sword. What begins as shame before the nobles turns into something no one expected. The prince does not turn her away. Instead, he demands she serve in his palace, under his watchful eye. By candlelight, she proves herself kinder and braver than any lady of rank. Yet behind the velvet curtains, whispers grow sharp as knives, rumors that the peasant girl is reaching for the throne itself. And the king? He would rather see her ruined than let her stand beside his son. But when riots rise outside the palace gates and the kingdom itself trembles, only one question remains. Will the love between a peasant girl and a prince redeem a kingdom, or destroy them both? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Dawn crept slowly over the thatched roof of Anya's humble cottage, painting the morning sky in soft shades of pink and gold. Inside, the air hung heavy with sorrow. Her mother sat hunched by the dying hearth, tears falling silently onto her worn apron. The imprisonment of Anya's father weighed on them both like a physical burden. Anya's fingers trembled slightly as she laced her old leather shoes, the worn threads catching on her calloused hands. The shoes, like everything else they owned, showed the marks of hard work and careful mending. But they would have to carry her far today. "Mother," Anya said softly, touching the older woman's shoulder, "I must try. The crown prince is known to be just. Perhaps he will hear our plea." Her mother looked up, eyes red-rimmed. "The nobles care nothing for us, child." "Your father," her voice broke. "The baron's soldiers showed no mercy. Then I shall have to be brave enough for all of us." Anya moved about their small home, gathering what she needed for the journey. From their meager stores, she took a half loaf of dark bread, wrapping it carefully in a clean cloth. Their precious water flask, carved of wood and sealed with wax, she filled from the morning's drawing. The morning air bit sharp and clean as Anya stepped outside. She pulled her thin shawl tighter, offering a quiet prayer for strength. The journey to the royal hunting lodge would take many hours on foot. As she walked, the mud of the peasant's lane sucked at her shoes, each step requiring careful attention. The early morning fog clung to the hedgerows, and somewhere in the distance, a cock crowed. Anya kept to the side of the road as noble carriages thundered past, their wheels spraying dirty water. The occupants, when visible through fine glass windows, looked down their noses at the sight of her, a common girl trudging through the muck. "God give you good day, mistress," called an old woman tending geese by the roadside. "Where goes? You so early?" "To the royal hunting lodge," Anya replied, pausing briefly. "My father sits in the baron's prison for failing to meet grain quotas after the drought." The woman clicked her tongue sympathetically. "Waste of shoe leather, child. Nobles don't hear common folks' troubles. They live in a different world then." "We do." Similar warnings followed Anya through the morning. At the village well, "Turn back, girl, the prince won't see you." In the marketplace, "They'll laugh you away from the gates." But Anya pressed forward, one step at a time, her father's face fixed in her mind. The sun climbed high, then began its slow descent. Anya's feet ached fiercely, but she allowed herself only brief rest to sip water and nibble sparingly at her bread. The rough lane gave way to a better-kept road, then finally to the manicured grounds surrounding the hunting lodge. As dusk painted the sky in purple shadows, Anya finally glimpsed the lodge through the trees. It rose like something from a dream, all warm stone and gleaming windows, with proud banners snapping in the evening breeze. Her heart sank at the sight of the iron gates and the guards in their fine uniforms, but she forced herself forward on trembling legs. Approaching the gates, Anya sank to her knees in the proper pose of supplication. "Please," she called out, her voice hoarse from the dust of the road. "I beg audience with His Highness the Crown Prince." The guards exchanged amused glances. One laughed outright. "Off with you, peasant girl. His Highness doesn't receive common folk." "Please," Anya repeated, not moving from her knees. "My father's life may depend upon it." "And why should that concern the prince?" The second guard sneered, but Anya remained kneeling as the light faded and the evening chill deepened. When the guards changed watch, she was still there. When midnight passed, marked by distant church bells, she had not moved. Finally, as false dawn began to lighten the sky, the captain of the guard approached her. "You're either the most stubborn or the most foolish girl I've ever seen," he said, though his tone held a note of reluctant respect. "Very well. When the great hall opens for morning petitions, you may enter. But mind your manners, girl, or it's the stocks for you." Anya's heart leaped, though she kept her face carefully composed. "Thank you, sir. God bless your kindness." The captain grunted and turned away, but Anya caught the ghost of a smile on his weathered face. She settled in to wait for morning, offering silent prayers of gratitude. The first hurdle was passed, but the greatest test still lay ahead. The morning sun streamed through tall windows, casting golden light across the great hall's polished marble floors. Anya stood at the entrance, her worn dress and mud-splattered, a stark contrast to the sea of silk and satin before her. The air was thick with perfume and the rustle of expensive fabric as courtiers turned to stare. Guards flanked her as she walked forward, her legs trembling beneath her simple skirts. Powdered wigs bobbed as nobles whispered behind jeweled fans, their mocking laughter echoing off the vaulted ceiling. Anya kept her eyes fixed on the ornate throne ahead, where Crown Prince Leopold sat with perfect, rigid posture. He looked exactly as she had imagined from village tailies, handsome but cold. His blue velvet coat adorned with silver threading that caught the light. His expression was one of practiced boredom as he observed her approach through half-lidded eyes. "Your Highness," Anya said, dropping into a deep curtsy. Her knees met the cool marble floor with a soft thud. "I come to beg mercy for my father." Leopold's fingers drummed against the gilded arm of his chair. "Another peasant's plea? How tiresome." His voice carried the cultured accent of the capital, each word precisely carved from ice. "Please," Anya cried, her desperation breaking through proper protocol. "Take me. I'll do anything to spare my father." The words echoed in the vast hall. Titters of laughter rippled through the crowd. A lady in pink silk whispered loudly, "How?" "Common," while her companion hid his smirk behind a lace handkerchief. "Anything?" Leopold's tone held a dangerous edge. He leaned forward slightly, studying her with new interest. "Then give me sons." The courtier's laughter grew louder, more cruel. Anya felt heat flood her cheeks, but something inside her, perhaps the same strength that had carried her through miles of muddy roads, made her lift her chin, looking directly into the prince's cold eyes. She spoke with quiet dignity. "Your Highness mistakes desperation for lack of virtue. I offer my service, not my shame." The laughter stopped abruptly. No one spoke to the crown prince with such directness. Leopold's eyebrows rose fractionally, the first genuine expression to cross his face. He stood, his movements fluid and controlled, and descended 3 steps to tower over her kneeling form. "You dare lecture me on virtue, peasant girl?" "I dare speak truth, your Highness," Anya replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "As my father taught me." A heavy silence fell over the hall. The courtiers held their collective breath, waiting for the prince's anger. But Leopold's face showed something else entirely, a flicker of intrigue, like a man who had found an unexpected piece in a game of chess. "Truth," he repeated softly, as if tasting the word. Then louder, "Very well. I will release your father from his imprisonment." Before Anya could express her gratitude, he raised one elegant hand. on one condition. You will enter my household as a servant, where I may observe if this honesty of yours proves consistent." Whispers erupted among the courtiers. Anya's heart pounded. To leave her family, her village, but to save her father. "I accept, your highness," she said, bowing her head low to hide the tears of relief in her eyes. "Rise," Leopold commanded. As Anya got to her feet, he addressed a stern-faced woman in dark gray silk. "Madame Hewitt, see that she is properly attired and instructed in her duties." His gaze returned to Anya, sharp and assessing. "You begin your service tonight." Madame Hewitt's firm hand closed around Anya's arm, steering her toward a side door. As they left the great hall, Anya caught one last glimpse of Prince Leopold, who had already turned away to address his court. But she could have sworn she saw him glance back, that same look of curiosity still playing across his features. The door closed behind them with a heavy thud, and Anya found herself being led down narrow servant corridors, away from the glitter and grandeur, toward her new life in the palace. The first rays of dawn crept through the narrow window of the servants' quarters as Anya stood before Mrs. Beatrice, the stern-faced head housekeeper. The older woman's lips pressed into a thin line as she thrust a bundle of rough gray linens into Anya's arms. "These will be your work clothes," Mrs. Beatrice said, her voice clipped. "You will wear them with care and dignity, as befits service. To the crown. Your duties begin at first light and end when the last candle is snuffed." Anya changed quickly behind a wooden screen, the coarse fabric scratching against her skin. The dress was plain but clean, marking her new station as clearly as any badge. Mrs. Beatrice watched with sharp eyes as Anya emerged, adjusting her white cap. "Now then, you'll start each day by bringing fresh water to the upper floors. The prince's chambers require particular attention. Floors scrubbed daily, linens changed, fires tended." The housekeeper's face softened slightly. "Mind you keep your eyes down and your tongue still when attending His Highness." Throughout the morning, Anya's arms ached from carrying heavy water buckets up the winding servant stairs. Her knees grew raw from scrubbing endless marble floors. Yet she worked without complaint, grateful that each task meant one more day her father would remain free. As she polished brass fixtures in the hallway, two passing maids whispered loudly enough for her to hear. "Did you see how the prince looked at her yesterday?" one hissed. "Never seen him give a common girl a second glance before." "Above herself, that one," the other replied. "Mark my words, no good comes from catching royal attention." Their words followed Anya like shadows as she went about her duties. When the dinner bell finally rang, she made her way to the servants' hall, her stomach growling. The long wooden tables were crowded with tired workers sharing bread and thin soup. A plump, friendly-faced woman patted the bench beside her. "Come sit, dear. You look done in. I'm Marta, from the kitchens." Grateful for the kindness, Anya sank down beside her. Marta pushed over a bowl of soup and extra bread. "Pay no mind to the gossips," she said quietly. "They're just jealous because you've got something they haven't, honest courage." But across the table, several maids turned their backs pointedly, their whispers sharp as needles. Anya focused on her soup, trying to ignore the sting of their rejection. Later that evening, as Anya carried fresh linens past the library, she heard weak coughing. The door stood ajar, revealing the prince's younger brother huddled in a chair, his face pale and drawn. Without thinking, she stepped inside. "Would you like me to read to you, my lord?" she asked softly. "It always comforted me when I was ill." The young man's eyes brightened. "The Psalms, perhaps?" "They're my favorite." Anya sat carefully on a footstool and opened the leather-bound Bible. Her clear voice filled the quiet room with ancient words of comfort. "The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want." She didn't notice the library's other door opening, nor Prince Leopold standing in shadow. He watched silently as she read, noting how gently she adjusted his brother's blanket. How her voice brought peace to the sickly young man's face. When the last candle was snuffed in the servants' wing that night, Anya lay in her narrow bed, the thin mattress stuffed with straw. Through her small window, she could see stars scattered across the velvet sky. "Lord, give me strength," she whispered, drawing her rough blanket closer. "Help me endure whatever tomorrow brings." In his chambers above, Prince Leopold stood at his window, gazing down at the faint glow of candlelight in the servants' quarters. His expression was thoughtful as he watched the small flame that marked where Anya slept, until it finally flickered out in the darkness. Morning sunlight streamed through the palace chapel's stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the polished marble floor. Anya sat quietly in the back rows with the other servants, her hands folded in prayer. The nobles occupied the front pews, their silk garments and jewels glittering in the filtered light. Lady Clarence turned in her cushioned seat, her painted lips curling into a sneer as she nudged Lady Margaret beside her. Their whispers carried through the hushed chapel like angry wasps. Can you imagine? A common field mouse, thinking she might catch a prince? "'Tis shameful indeed," Lady Margaret replied, her fan fluttering like nervous wings. "I heard she offered herself to His Highness right there in the great hall." Anya kept her eyes fixed on the altar, though her cheeks burned. The morning prayers seemed to stretch endlessly as more nobles cast glances over their shoulders, their disapproving murmurs mixing with the priest's Latin verses. After the service, Anya hurried to her duties in the dining hall, where preparations for the evening's banquet were underway. She carefully arranged silver goblets while Marta, her friend from the kitchens, laid out fresh linens. "Pay them no mind," Marta whispered, seeing Anya's drawn face. "Their words are as empty as their hearts." The banquet began as the sun set, casting long shadows through the hall's tall windows. Anya moved quietly between the tables, filling wine glasses with practiced care. The court ladies' laughter rang sharp and false above the gentle music of the chamber orchestra. As Anya passed behind Lady Clarence's chair, the lady's maid stepped directly into her path. Time seemed to slow as the maid's shoulder knocked against Anya's arm, sending dark red wine cascading down the front of Anya's gray servant's dress. "Oh," the maid exclaimed with false concern, her eyes gleaming with malice. "How clumsy of you." Laughter erupted from the nearby tables. Anya stood perfectly still, the wine seeping cold through her bodice, her face burning with humiliation. But she refused to flee or cry out. Instead, she squared her shoulders and met Lady Clarence's mocking gaze with quiet dignity. "Perhaps," Prince Leopold's voice cut through the laughter like a sword, "we might all learn from such composure." His eyes swept the table, settling briefly on Lady Clarence. "It seems even a servant shows more dignity than certain noble tongues." A hush fell over the hall. The king, seated at the head table, raised an eyebrow at his son's words, but said nothing. Anya curtsied deeply and withdrew to change her dress, her heart thundering in her chest. Word of the incident spread quickly through the servants' quarters. That evening, as Anya scrubbed wine stains from her dress, she found herself surrounded by fellow servants offering clean aprons and kind words. Even Mrs. Beatrice, the stern housekeeper, nodded approvingly as she passed. Later, when the moon hung high over the palace gardens, Anya slipped out to hang her damp dress on a line strung between the yew trees. The night air carried the sweet scent of summer roses, a gentle balm to her troubled spirit. "Miss Anya." She turned, startled, to find Prince Leopold standing in the shadows of a marble archway. Quickly she dropped into a deep curtsy, her heart racing. "Your Highness." "Please," he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "I wish to thank you for your courage today. Few at court face adversity with such grace." Anya remained in her curtsy, hardly daring to breathe. The moonlight silvered his features, and for the first time, she glimpsed something beyond his usual stern demeanor, a gentle warmth that made her pulse quicken. "You are too kind, Your Highness," she whispered, her eyes lowered respectfully. Though she could feel his gaze upon her face, the night air seemed to hold its breath around them. Filled with unspoken words and possibilities, neither dared to voice. The morning sun cast long shadows across the laundry yard as Anya's arms ached from scrubbing the heavy palace linens. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the cool air. Other washerwomen had gone inside for their morning meal, leaving her alone with the endless piles of white sheets. "You work even when others rest," a familiar voice spoke behind her. Anya whirled around, nearly dropping the wet linen. Prince Leopold stood there, his formal jacket exchanged for a simpler riding coat. She quickly dropped into a curtsy, water dripping from her hands. "Your Highness, please, continue your work," he said, settling onto a wooden bench nearby. "I would speak with you if I may." Her hands trembled as she returned to her washing, very aware of his steady gaze. "How fares your father?" he asked softly. "Better, Your Highness, thanks to your mercy. The village physician visits him daily." She wrung out a sheet with more force than necessary, trying to steady her nerves. "And your faith sustains you still?" His tone held genuine curiosity. "'Tis all that gives me strength some days," she admitted, glancing up to find his eyes fixed intently upon her face. "That, and knowing my father is safe." "Safe. Tell me of your life before," he urged. "Your learning seems unusual for one of your station." Anya's hands stilled on the wet linen. "The village priest taught me letters when I helped tend his garden. I would read scripture to the sick afterward." She smiled at the memory. Books were rare treasures, but he said knowledge belongs to all God's children. Leopold nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "Indeed, I have noticed how my brother brightens at your reading voice." He stood suddenly, brushing off his coat. "Speaking of which, I would have you read to him regularly now, each evening, after your duties." Her heart leaped even as worry creased her brow. "The other servants already whisper." "Let them whisper," he cut in firmly. "My brother's comfort matters more than idle gossip." 3 nights later, the palace blazed with hundreds of candles as masked nobles swirled across the ballroom floor. Anya moved carefully between the dancers, balancing the tray of wine glasses. Her simple servant's garb stood stark against the shimmer of silk and gleam of jewels. From his position on the raised dais, Leopold sat beside his father, wearing a golden mask that caught the candlelight. Though he appeared to watch the dancers, Anya felt his gaze following her movements. When she dared glance up, she caught a softness in his expression that made her cheeks flush. The court ladies noticed too. They huddled in corners, fans fluttering, like angry birds as they whispered behind them. "Did you see how he watches that common drudge? Shameless creature, always finding excuses to be near him. Someone ought to remind her of her proper place." Their venom grew sharper as the night wore on, but Anya kept her head high, remembering Leopold's words about idle gossip. As the last guests departed and servants began extinguishing candles, a page boy touched Anya's elbow. "His Highness requests your presence in the chapel," he whispered before vanishing into shadows. Heart pounding, she made her way through moonlit corridors to the palace chapel. Leopold stood before the altar, his mask discarded, face pale in the light of prayer candles. "Anya," he breathed as she approached. "My heart's choice." She trembled as he took her work-roughened hands in his. "Your Highness, we cannot. We can. We must." He drew a ring from his pocket, a simple gold band set with a single pearl. "Before God as my witness, I choose you as my bride. Not for duty, not for politics, but for love." The ring slid onto her finger as tears spilled down her cheeks. "The court will never accept. They will learn to accept what their future king commands," he said firmly, then gentled his tone. "But first, I pledge myself to you here, in God's sight, where birth and rank hold no meaning." His hands shook as he raised them to cup her face, and in that trembling, Anya read the depth of his feeling that matched her own. The chapel's stone walls glowed softly in the candlelight, shadows dancing across the ancient wooden pews. Anya's heart fluttered as she knelt beside Prince Leopold before the altar. Only Father Thomas and the prince's trusted valet stood witness to this sacred moment, their faces solemn in the flickering light. Leopold's hands trembled slightly as he clasped Anya's work-roughened fingers in his own. His voice, usually so commanding, grew tender. "I, Leopold, take thee, Anya, to be my wife. Before God and these witnesses, I pledge my heart and my faith to you alone." Tears glistened in Anya's eyes as she responded, her voice clear and steady. Despite her racing heart, "I, Anya, take thee, Leopold, to be my husband. I give you my love, my loyalty, and my life from this day forward." Father Thomas blessed their union with whispered prayers, while the valet pressed his hand to his heart, moved by the genuine affection between prince and servant. The simple gold ring Leopold had given her caught the candlelight, a constant reminder of their secret bond. In the weeks that followed, their love bloomed like spring flowers in hidden corners of the palace. The library became their sanctuary during quiet afternoon hours, where Leopold would find Anya dusting shelves, and they would share precious moments discussing books and dreams. "Your mind fascinates me as much as your heart," Leopold confessed. One afternoon, watching her trace the lines of an old map, "You see the world with such clear eyes." The gardens offered them stolen moments at twilight, when Anya's duties took her to gather herbs for the kitchen. Leopold would appear as if by chance, and they would walk among the rose bushes, their whispered conversations masked by the evening birdsong. Each morning in the chapel, they exchanged glances during prayers, their secret warming them like sunshine. Even the simplest tasks became treasured memories. Anya serving at dinner while Leopold sat at the high table, their eyes meeting briefly over the rim of a silver goblet. But joy, however sweet, could not entirely quiet their fears. In the servants' hall, Marta pulled Anya aside one evening, her weathered face creased with worry. "Child, you're glowing like a candle in the dark," she whispered, patting Anya's hand. "But remember, the higher you climb, the harder the fall. Be careful with that tender heart of yours." Anya squeezed her friend's hand gratefully. "I know the risk, Marta, but love gives me courage I never knew I had." Their caution served them well for a time, but fate had other plans. One quiet evening found them in the library, where leather-bound books stretched from floor to ceiling. Leopold had sought her out, unable to resist the pull of her presence. "My father speaks of arranging a marriage," he murmured, taking her hand, "but I've already made my choice." His thumb brushed over her ring, hidden beneath her worn glove. Anya leaned closer, drawing strength from his nearness. "Whatever comes, I am yours," she whispered. The heavy library door creaked open. They sprang apart, but not quickly enough. The king himself stood in the doorway, his imposing figure backlit by the hallway torches. Time seemed to freeze as his gaze fell first on their clasped hands, then on Anya's ring glinting in the lamplight. The color drained from his face, replaced by a terrible fury that transformed his features. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, and when he spoke, his voice cut through the silence like a blade through silk. "What is the meaning of this?" The words emerged as a dangerous whisper, more frightening than any shout could have been. Leopold stepped forward, placing himself between Anya and his father, but the damage was done. Their precious secret lay exposed in the harsh light of discovery, and the king's thunderous expression promised consequences neither of them could escape. The morning sun cast long shadows across the throne room's marble floor, but its warmth could not pierce the icy atmosphere within. Anya stood trembling before the king, her worn servant's dress a stark contrast to the gilded surroundings. The king's face was thunderous as he rose from his throne, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "You dare to deceive the crown?" He bellowed, pointing an accusatory finger at Anya. A common servant, plotting to ensnare my son and heir. Leopold stepped forward, his face pale but determined. Father, there is no deception. Silence. The king's command cracked like a whip. You are stripped of your duties until you come to your senses. No son of mine will throw away his birthright for a peasant's daughter. The assembled courtiers pressed closer, their silk gowns rustling like dry leaves in autumn. Lady Margaret, her face twisted with spite, called out, "The little seductress played her part well, your majesty, using her father's imprisonment to worm her way into the palace." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Someone hissed witch, while another whispered common trash. Anya stood straight back despite the cruel words, though her heart felt ready to shatter. "Guards!" the king's voice boomed. "Remove this deceiver from my sight, and send word to the baron her father's reprieve is ended." 2 soldiers stepped forward, their mail shirts jingling as they took Anya's arms. She did not resist, but her eyes sought Leopold's across the room. His face was a mask of anguish and fury. "This is madness!" Leopold surged forward, but more guards blocked his path. "Father, you cannot. I can and I will." "Take the prince to his chambers," the king commanded. "Post guards at his door. He is not to leave until this foolishness is purged from his mind." Leopold fought against the guard's grip. "Anya, I will not abandon you." "Father, she is my wife before God. Blasphemy." The king roared, "Take him away." Anya's heart clenched as she watched Leopold being dragged from the throne room, still struggling, still calling her name. The soldiers escorted her through corridors where she had once served, past servants who turned their faces away. Only Marta, the kitchen maid, dared to press a small loaf of bread into her hands as she passed. Outside the palace gates, the guards released her with a rough shove. "Be grateful His Majesty shows mercy," one said. Others would have seen you flogged for such presumption. The long walk back to her village seemed to take ages. When she finally arrived, news of her disgrace had preceded her. But instead of the scorn she expected, she found sympathy in weathered faces and work-worn hands. "You showed them true courage, lass," old Thomas the miller said, offering her a portion of flour. "They fear what they cannot control," added Widow Bennet, pressing a warm shawl around Anya's shoulders. Even young children brought her wild berries. They had gathered, their small faces solemn with concern. The village's support warmed her heart, though it could not fully ease her pain. That evening, alone in her family's humble cottage, Anya huddled near the dying embers of the hearth. Winter. Winds howled outside, raveling the shutters and sending cold drafts through the cracks in the walls. Her fingers found the ring Leopold had given her, still hanging from a ribbon hidden beneath her dress. The gold felt warm against her palm as she clutched it, remembering their vows in the palace chapel. "Lord," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the wind, "grant me wisdom. Show me the path I must take." The ring glinted in the fading firelight, a symbol of love freely given, of promises made before God, of a bond that transcended the boundaries of class and custom. Despite everything, Anya's faith remained unshaken. Whatever trials lay ahead, she would face them with the same courage that had carried her this far. Winter's icy fingers reached into every corner of the village. Anya pulled her thin shawl tighter as she trudged through the snow, carrying an armload of broken branches. The early morning light cast long shadows across the white blanketed fields as she made her way to Widow Miller's cottage. "Here, let me help with that," Anya said softly, setting down her own load to assist Thomas, a young boy struggling with his bundle of firewood. His grateful smile warmed her heart more than any fire could. Inside the widow's humble dwelling, little Sarah lay, burning with fever on her small cot. Anya placed a cool cloth on the child's forehead and whispered soothing prayers. The girl's mother watched with tired eyes, dark circles beneath them telling of sleepless nights. "You are a blessing, Anya," Widow Miller said, her voice trembling. "We would have so little hope without you." Word spread through the village of Anya's gentle care and tireless service. As she moved from cottage to cottage, helping where she could, the villagers began speaking of her in hushed, reverent tones. "There goes our true lady," old Thomas the baker would say, nodding respectfully as she passed. "She has the bearing of nobility," women whispered at the well, "not by birth, but by the grace in her heart." These words brought both comfort and pain to Anya's heart, reminding her of what she had lost. Yet she kept her chin high in her hands, busy, finding purpose and service to others. Miles away in the palace, Prince Leopold paced his chambers like a caged lion. His quarters, though luxurious, had become a prison. Tapestries that once seemed rich now appeared gaudy, and the gilded furniture mocked his misery. Each day without Anya felt endless. "I cannot bear this separation," he confided to his loyal valet one evening. "My heart withers without her." The valet, ever faithful, nodded sympathetically. "Perhaps, Your Highness, there might be a way to maintain contact if one were discreet." That night, by candlelight, Leopold penned his first letter to Anya. His hands, trained in formal script, trembled as he wrote of his undying love and his determination to find a way back to her. "My dearest heart," he wrote, "though they may separate our bodies, they cannot divide our souls. Each morning I watch the sun rise and know you see the same light. Each night I pray beneath the same stars that guide your steps." The valet proved invaluable, discovering secret ways to deliver these precious messages. Sometimes hidden in bread deliveries, sometimes tucked into traveling merchants' packs, the letters found their way to Anya's hands. Her responses, written by candlelight after long days of labor, gave Leopold strength. "Keep faith, my love," she wrote in one letter. "God tests our hearts like gold in the fire, but pure gold fears no flame." As winter deepened, hardship grew more severe. Food became scarce, and the palace's grain stores remained locked while common folk went hungry. Anya shared what little she had, breaking her own bread into ever smaller pieces to feed hungry children. One bitter cold morning, as Anya helped distribute soup at the village square, a rider appeared on a frost-covered horse. His cloak was dusted with snow, and his face was grave as he called for attention. "Riots have broken out in the capital," he announced, his voice carrying across the silent square. "The people cry out for bread, but the palace gates remain closed. There's talk of storming the granaries." The villagers murmured in fear and anger, but Anya stood perfectly still, her mind racing. She knew the palace, its passages, and most importantly, the hearts of both nobles and common folk. Perhaps she could bridge this deadly divide before blood was shed. Looking down at the humble ring still circling her finger, their secret token of love, she knew what she must do. The people needed hope, the nobles needed understanding. And somewhere between the two, there might be peace. Anya handed her soup ladle to Widow Miller and straightened her shoulders. The time for hiding was over. She must act not for herself, but for all those who suffered. The cart's wooden wheels creaked through the frozen morning as Anya huddled beneath a rough woolen blanket. Around her, 5 village elders sat with grave faces, their breath forming clouds in the bitter air. They had begged her to speak for them at the palace, pressing copper coins into her hands for the journey. "You have the gentle touch, lass," old Thomas had said, his weathered face creased with worry. "They'll hear you when they'd cut us down." The journey seemed to take forever, but as they approached the capital, Anya's heart quickened at the sight of smoke rising from countless chimneys. Then she heard it, angry voices carried on the wind, growing louder as they drew closer to the palace gates. Hundreds of townspeople crowded the square, their faces thin with hunger, fists raised toward the palace walls. Guards stood nervously at their posts, spears clutched tight. The scene made Anya's blood run cold. She had never seen such desperation, such fury. "Bread!" they shouted. "Our children starve while nobles feast." Someone hurled a stone. It clattered against the palace wall as guards raised their weapons. Anya knew she had to act quickly before blood was shed. Without hesitation, she climbed down from the cart, her legs trembling but her voice steady as she called out, "Brothers! Sisters, please hear me." At first, only those nearest turned to look. But something in her voice, perhaps it's familiar, warmth so different from the angry shouts, made others pause and listen. "I know your hunger," she continued, moving through the crowd. "I know your fear. But violence will bring only more suffering. If we attack the palace, soldiers will come. Our homes will burn. Our children will have neither bread nor shelter." More faces turned toward her now. Some recognized her from the villages, whispering her name. Anya felt strength flowing into her voice as she spoke from her heart. "We must show wisdom, not fury. Let me speak to them. I have walked these palace halls. I know their ways. Together we can find a path forward, one that doesn't end in bloodshed." The angry murmurs began to quiet. Even the guards seemed to relax, their grip on their weapons, watching this strange scene unfold. Suddenly, a commotion arose from within the palace. The great doors swung open, and gasps rippled through the crowd as Prince Leopold himself strode out, breaking free from several guards who tried to restrain him. "Your Highness," one guard pleaded, "your father forbade." "Enough!" Leopold's voice rang across the square. He looked thinner than when Anya had last seen him, his face pale from confinement, but his eyes blazed with determination. "I will not hide while my people suffer." He crossed the space between them with long strides, and Anya's heart leaped as he took her hand in his. Together they turned to face both nobles and commoners. The entire kingdom gathered in one place, watching. In astonishment, Leopold's voice carried clearly across the hushed square. "Before you all, I declare this woman my lawful wife, joined in holy matrimony within these very walls." He raised their joined hands high. "Here stands my bride, noble in soul if not in birth." A moment of stunned silence followed. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, a cheer went up. It was taken up by others, first the common folk, then even some of the palace servants watching from windows and doorways. The sound swelled until it echoed off the palace walls, drowning out any voices of protest from the noble onlookers that the people's anger had transformed into joy, their desperation into hope. They pressed forward not with violence now, but with smiles and calls of blessing. Anya felt tears on her cheeks as she saw her simple folk and Leopold's grand court join together in this moment of celebration. The bitter divisions between them beginning to heal. The great hall of the palace buzzed with tension as nobles, servants, and common folk alike gathered before the king's throne. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, making the golden crown upon the king's head gleam like fire. His stern face betrayed nothing as he surveyed the assembled crowd. Anya stood beside Leopold, her simple blue dress a stark contrast to the sea of silk and jewels surrounding them. Yet she held her head high, drawing strength from Leopold's warm hand clasping hers. "We are gathered," the king's voice echoed through the hall, "to determine the fate of this unusual union." His eyes fixed upon Anya with calculated assessment. "My son claims you worthy of a crown. Prove your worth before this court." Leopold stepped forward, his voice ringing with passion. "Father, what greater nobility exists than that of the spirit?" While ladies of the court schemed and flattered, Anya showed true courage. When riots threatened violence, her wisdom brought peace. He turned to face the assembled crowd, his arms sweeping wide. "She came here barefoot to save her father, yet ended up saving us all from our own blindness. What silk-gowned lady has shown such strength? What noble birth has produced such grace under fire?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathered servants and townspeople. Old Thomas, the village elder, stepped forward and bowed awkwardly. "Begging your pardon, your majesty," he said, his voice quavering but clear. "But the lass has always been our light. When children were sick, she nursed them. When harvests failed, she shared what little she had. That's true nobility, if you ask me." More voices joined in. A kitchen maid spoke of Anya's kindness to the lowest servants. The palace chaplain testified to her deep faith and wisdom. Even some of the noble ladies, moved by the overwhelming show of support, admitted her dignified bearing in the face of their cruelty. The king listened in silence, his expression unchanging. But his eyes betrayed a growing thoughtfulness as testimony after testimony painted a picture of quiet strength and genuine nobility of spirit. Finally, he raised his hand for silence. The hall grew still as he studied the couple before him. Leopold stood proud and unwavering, while Anya met his gaze with gentle dignity. "It seems," the king said slowly, "that wisdom can come from unexpected sources. My son, you have chosen not just a bride, but a partner worthy of helping you rule." He stood, and a collective gasp rippled through the hall. "I hereby grant my blessing and approval to this union." Joy erupted throughout the great hall. Servants embraced nobles, and peasants cheered alongside courtiers. The barriers of class that had divided them seemed to melt away in that moment of shared celebration. Within days, the wedding preparations began in earnest. Bands were proclaimed in every church, and bells rang out across the capital, their joyous pealing carrying the news to every corner of the kingdom. The palace bustled with activity as servants hung garlands and polished silver, their faces bright with genuine happiness for the couple they had come to love. The wedding itself was a blend of royal splendor and humble grace. Anya wore a gown of finest silk, but carried a bouquet of simple wildflowers from her village. Noble ladies and peasant girls alike scattered rose petals in her path. Leopold beamed with pride as he placed his ring upon her finger, this time before the eyes of all dot as the celebrations continued into the evening. Leopold led his bride into the palace gardens where their love had first blossomed in secret. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of gold and rose, while the scent of summer flowers filled the air. Here, where Anya had once crept fearfully as a servant, she now walked tall as princess consort, her hand steady in her husband's grasp. She paused beside a flowering rosebush, her eyes bright with happy tears as she turned to face her prince. "My love," she whispered, reaching up to touch his cheek, "do you remember what you asked of me that first day in the great hall? You said, 'Give me sons.'" She smiled, her voice full of gentle promise. "I shall give you more than that. I shall give you a kingdom reborn in love." Thank you for watching. Stories like this remind us who we are. If something touched your heart, go ahead and subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with another story that just might stay with you.